we have patients where we've shown an MRI before an injection and 12 months later having increased the thickness of the cartilage in their knee, for example, by at least 25%. Not everybody, but many of them. Even some of those that don't have a lot of cartilage regeneration through that process have improvement in their pain and their function, good enough that they can avoid seeing their orthopedic surgeon. We've moved them backwards along the desire and need for a knee surgery.
That was Dr. Jeff Gross, and you've landed on the Me&my Health Up podcast. I'm your host, Anthony Hartcher, your Wellseerge. The purpose of this podcast is to enhance and enlighten your well-being, and I'm privileged and honored to have back Dr. Jeff Gross, neurosurgeon. Yes, we're talking regenerative medicine again, so if you missed the last episode, please check it out. Look it up. It is on regenerative medicine. We talk about a lot about how stem cells can be used for regenerating yourself, regenerating, to really help you recover from injuries or potentially preventing surgery. So Jeff found through his practice over many years that, yes, he could do surgery, but could he help his clients in another way? So he looked and researched, went back to the basics of molecular biology and found stem cells. From there, he discovered peptides, and now he's on to exosomes. So we're going to talk about stem cells, peptides, exosomes, and how they can aid longevity, regeneration, and ultimately could prevent surgery. So without much further ado, I'd love to welcome you into the discussion I'm having with Dr. Jeff Gross. Welcome on the Me&my Health Up podcast. How are you, Dr. Jeff?
Great. It's great to see you again.
Absolutely. Really good to have you on the show, and really looking forward to this conversation. I think certainly since we last spoke, longevity, regenerative medicine has really hit the spotlight, and there's a lot of conversations, a lot of articles being published, a lot of people talking about it. So really keen to get your updated insights on regenerative medicine. But before we get into that, I'd love you to bring the listeners up to speed with how you've arrived at what you're doing today.
Great. And thank you for having me back. It's been a few years, and some of the work you're doing by bringing this onto your show helps move the conversation forward and put it in the spotlight. So you should get some credit for that. To introduce myself to your new listeners and hopefully remind some of the old ones, I'm a recovering neurological surgeon. I practice neurosurgery with specialty in the spine. So besides brain surgery, I did a lot of spine surgery, spinal medicine, neck and back problems, pinched nerves, disc issues, typical problems that we see in the clinic. And I became frustrated and turned back to what I studied in my undergraduate college days, which was molecular biology and biochemistry, which is the field of stem cells. And I said, shoot, what's happened? And a lot of patients encouraged me. So I went back, re-studied, relearned, re-educated, because I wanted to add that regenerative piece as a tool to all the things I offer people. And guess what? Now it's all I do. Almost abandoned surgery except for a few things. And we do a lot in the regenerative medicine space, including stem cells, stem cell derived signals like exosomes, peptides, and things like that, which hopefully you'll uncover here as we go forward.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a bit of terminology that the listeners may not be up to speed with. So let's talk about the foundations of where you went with your molecular biology, and that was in stem cells. So just bring the listeners up to speed with what stem cells are and how they work in the body.
So many people have heard the phrase stem cells, and what they are stem from, ironically, how a baby is made. So if you are a fertilized egg inside your mother's womb, you are a single cell, but you have unlimited power to make a human. And that is from which all other cells stem. Therefore, it's the most powerful stem cell. And this cell divides, it forms, a ball of cells, an embryo. That embryo then flattens out and forms into a lizard-looking like structure, a fetus, and then a human-like structure. And those cells become less powerful, but still can make a limb or an organ. And eventually you're born. And you're born with a bank of cells that can help you grow, that can help you heal and repair and replace. And those are called your stem cells. And they live in different places in your body, mostly your bone marrow, some in fat, some in other places. And we tap into those cells during our lifetime. And that's what a stem cell is.
And so obviously these stem, once we're born, these stem cells are really helping us, will continue to grow and develop. Once we've fully grown and developed, then it's that more regenerative support, right?
Right. And then as we age, we lose some effect of those stem cells, both in quantity and in quality. They just don't work as well because we're exposed to a life of defending against inflammatory challenges in our environment. Things in our food, in our water, in our air, in the electromagnetic waves, in stress, and then things we shouldn't also have, like toxins and infections and viruses, and then things we really probably missed out on, like really good, natural of the earth probiotics all the time, and organic foods and really clean meat sources, things like that. So our body's busy fighting this inflammatory damage, and our stem cells are faced with that same thing. They're fighting the same thing, and they become less effective to heal. And that's why a very young person heals rapidly and an older person struggles to heal at that pace.
Yeah, okay. And so how do you then work with stem cells with older patients? So like you see a lot of mature patients with injuries and damaged spine and, related to the neurology and things like that. So how do you get these stem cells that are, produced early on in life and help your mature patients?
Well, you pointed out something very important there is, although anyone can use your own stem cells, you can donate your own to yourself. Certainly when you take your automobile in to change the oil, you don't put the old oil back in it. So we like fresh oil. So we have access to donated perinatal biologics. And let me explain that. That means when a mother has a C-section birth, congratulations, here's your healthy baby. We were going to throw away your placenta, your umbilical cord, your amniotic fluid. Instead of throwing it away, let's make that trash treasure. So we have donor services. These are regulated by agencies here, at least in the States. I imagine where you are, there's a similar, same people who help get kidneys for donation and things like that. So it's handled in a sterile fashion. These are from screened donors. It's a true donation. These mothers are not paid. So they're not out there, making profit by having babies for this purpose. And they have to have a healthy baby. They have to be healthy. These tissues are then screened and tested at the highest levels so that they are safe for use. And there are many companies, labs who are registered with our government agencies who regulate this, and they have to follow rules on documentation and handling and cleanliness and all that. They make them available to end user clinics like myself. I do know that where you are, it's a little more challenging to come about these things. And many patients from Australia have to go to other countries. And that hopefully it's coming. Hopefully there'll be some advancement there. But that's really how we get these.
And then how do you, and I'm not sure if this is even a problem, but I'm just thinking typically when organs are donated, someone else, sometimes there's a bit of an immune response from the individual and there can be rejection. How do you work with that, or if it's an issue?
That's a great question. So first, organs have markers on their cells. And you and I know what those markers are, but maybe not everyone does. And these are markers that are basically a serial number to the individual. And if you don't match up those serial numbers when you put them in someone else, this is called tissue matching or typing, then you can have an immune reaction because it's foreign to you. So it's like trying to put the wrong car part in your automobile when you're replacing a part because it's made for a different vehicle. So it won't fit. So luckily, stem cells are a little more primitive than other cells, and they're what are called immunoprivileged. That means they can walk up to the front of the line. They do not have to show any identification. They can walk right in the club, and they are welcomed in with either no or minimal immune response. On top of that, stem cell derived signals called exosomes, smaller vesicles, have really no markers on their cells, and they are even more immunoprivileged, and they can walk right in without any issue. We really don't see any immune reaction to those at all. Even with the stem cells, though, it's theoretical. I have never seen an immune reaction of any meaning after a stem cell delivery. So we just don't have that problem.
Wow. I'd love you to share some stories, of, I guess, clients sort of administered the stem cells and have had a incredible journey as a result. So yeah, please share any
Yeah.
stories.
Yeah, so let's start here. About a third of what I do these days is regenerative biologic injections into joint structures and spine structures for musculoskeletal pain that have suffered from an inflammatory degeneration and loss of cartilage that we call osteoarthritis. And you lose your cartilage. Cartilage is a protein, like hair is a protein. Hair is made in your scalp. It's not made on your head, and it's made inside the scalp from the follicles. Cartilage is made inside your bone edge. So those are cells that make cartilage. They're called chondrocytes. And over time, they get exposed to inflammatory stresses and life, and they become less functional. In fact, they're one of the earliest things to show signs of inflammation. So that's why osteoarthritis and degeneration of joints is very common, an early ailment in the age-related or inflammaging related process. So I do quite a few evaluations of patients with this issue who are trying to avoid surgery. They don't want a knee replacement. They don't want a spine surgery. And we offer them an option where we inject those chondrocytes with regenerative biologics. Now, we've gotten away from the actual stem cells so much because we find that the stem cell signals are doing the work anyway. And those are the exosomes and the growth factors that come in the amniotic fluid. They travel better through the body. They're less expensive, easier to store and handle, and other benefits. So we like them a lot. And we have patients where we've shown an MRI before an injection and 12 months later having increased the thickness of their cartilage in their knee, for example, by at least 25%. Not everybody, but many of them. Even some of those that don't have a lot of cartilage regeneration through that process have improvement in their pain and their function, good enough that they can avoid seeing their orthopedic surgeon. We've moved them backwards along the desire and need for a knee surgery. So we are happy to do that and enjoy really great benefits for most individuals. That's a common thing we do.
Yeah, wow. Yeah, and it's a typical aging thing. And one of the first things that people notice is, their joints and certain pain associated with joints. And yeah, so I could see why that's a common one to work with. I was just thinking around hernias, right? They become quite common as you sort of get, midlife. And have you had any success or does this help, I guess, preventing hernia surgery?
Now, are we talking about abdominal or inguinal hernias or disc hernias?
It's abdominal and inguinal hernias. Yeah, yeah.
So I have not treated abdominal or inguinal groin hernias because I think at this point that's purely structural. And although we might have a path to regenerating some of the abdominal wall tissues that become deficient, I haven't tried that yet. And we would have to figure out how to do that because that's a little more challenging, but not beyond the scope of what we might be doing down the line. I just haven't gone there yet.
It's in the pipes, potentially.
Yes, yeah, right.
And what about disc?
So disc, as you know, I come from spine surgery. So one of my original reasons for branching into and fully adopting regenerative medicine was to help people with disc issues. So we are working on what's called a sandwich therapy, by which we will inject Muse cells, which is a subset of stem cells that are more powerful in the disc, and in the bone edge where the chondrocytes are, we will inject, as we have been doing, the exosome stem cell signals so that you get a really robust regenerative chance at building both the nucleus of the disc, which is sort of the squishy part, and the structural, binding of the disc, which is the annulus, with the other injections at the same time. That's the sandwich. So we're now sourcing the Muse cells, as there is some good medical evidence from China that the Muse cells can regenerate the nucleus. And that's been one of the challenges we've been facing until now.
So in terms of working out how you apply your therapy, obviously you're working with stem cells. You just mentioned exosomes and also peptides, right? So and you've mentioned this sandwich thing, right? So what I envisage is, the stem cells are really working at the most foundational level, and then it's sort of layered above that. It'd be great if you could give an analogy of how this sort of layered therapy and how you apply it and to what you would apply it to.
Yeah. Well, with anyone, no matter what we're helping address or providing options for, we want to make sure the terrain is ready. So we go through someone's quality of life, their sleep, their exercise, their diet, their nutrition, their hormone status, their hormesis. Hormesis, for those listeners that don't know, means a slight bit of stress on your cells to build adaptability and resilience. So that might be high intensity exercise, hot saunas like in Finland, cold plunge, low oxygen tension, fasting would be a very common one. So we get someone as tuned up as we can. We also work towards suppressing inflammation. Then a lot of that's through diet and avoiding certain things. So once we get them all dialed in, if they still have issues, we're helping to address, whether it's structural, like when I do the joint work or spine work, or it's some inflammatory burden within the body, like autoimmune or long COVID or Lyme's disease or things like that, where we might do IV regenerative biologics. We like to start at the simple level, and that could be with peptides because they're so easy to do, which are small protein fragments, and work up to the regenerative level, which would be stem cells or exosomes. And let's define that if it's okay, Anthony. So exosomes represent what cells are doing when they communicate with their neighbors. So cells give off information in two forms, and that information is picked up by neighboring cells. So it's like a neighborhood watch. Hey, Mrs. Jones down the street, we saw a prowler, with casing the neighborhood, and he might be wanting to break into your home. So lock your doors, close your windows, all that. It's a neighborhood watch. So if you're under attack by an infection, you can warn your neighbor cells. Or if things are perfect in the environment, hey, we're healthy and happy, go back into normal operating mode, and it can send that signal. So those two forms are small exuded molecules called growth factors, proteins, or peptides. Peptides, of course, being smaller chains of amino acids, and proteins being longer chains of amino acids. And amino acids are the building block of these types of molecules. And that's why we eat a lot of protein. We break it down into amino acids and put them back together in the way we need them, right? We eat meat, we eat, dairy supplements, whey. If you're trying to put on muscle in the gym, you're taking, protein supplements for that reason. So the other signaling factor would be these small vesicles, extracellular vesicles. So the cell is off bubbling these little bubbles, smaller than a cell by 1/1000th. And they're measured in nanometers across. Some people call this nanomedicine or nanoparticles, but they're out of the cell. So for short, we call them exo for out of, somes, out of the body of the cell. Soma means body. So exosomes. Now you've got it, Anthony, exosomes. So when we say exosomes, all cells make them, but therapeutically, we use stem cell exosomes. And this year and in coming years, we're going to have more granular, specific types of exosomes. Exosomes, not only from regular stem cells, but from neurological stem cells or from skin type of cells, or for different purposes, because they have a cargo. And that cargo is information that's imported into the neighboring cells through a process called endocytosis, where the membrane of the vesicle is sort of incorporated into the cell wall and delivers its contents with high degree of efficiency. So it delivers microRNAs that influence that cell. It delivers peptides and proteins that influence that cell and tells that cell, hey, stop doing this activity, do this activity. So cells can work as a group. And then I think this is going to lead into maybe a question on plant exosomes coming up, I bet.
Yeah. Well, absolutely. So, do you derive these in the lab from like how they derived, where they're coming from? I guess your traditional source, and obviously this leads into now the plant-based exosomes. Yeah,
Sorry, yeah. I didn't mean to twist your arm, but the human-derived perinatal exosomes from the donated source are really sourced from amniotic fluid. So when we get that amniotic fluid, it's a filtered, tested, screened sample or dose, and that dose contains both the stem cell exosomes and the circulating growth factors. So you get the benefit of both. So if you've ever heard of PRP or platelet-rich plasma, where you have your blood drawn, it's spun in the centrifuge, and the platelet layer, which is that little layer in between the red blood cells and the plasma, sort of watery fluid, is got platelets and growth factors, and you can re-inject that for healing purposes. That's rich in growth factors. And then the stem cell exosomes, you match those together, and you get the dual action cell signaling for telling your cells to regenerate, to heal, to act in a more useful way. So we love that. And that's how I stumbled on a couple years ago the fact that plants make exosomes.
Wow. So tell us how you came about this discovery and how you then apply it to humans. And yeah, I assume it has a similar mechanism of action.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So I stumbled upon this because I'm a nerd and I get up every morning early and I have a Google alert set for anything in the exosome or stem cell realm. So I get a list of 10 or 12 published articles and I see if any interest me and I read them. So I'm up on the latest literature no later than 7 a.m. And then I came across something about plant exosomes. So I started reading and researching further. And over a number of weeks, I did a very deep dive and found out that plants, fruits, vegetables, plants have amazing healing properties. That's not new to us, right? And food is medicine. We wouldn't have pharmaceuticals if it weren't for plants, right? That all stems from plants. Well, one of the best things we get from plants, besides fiber and, sometimes sugar, even though too much of that's bad, are what's called phytonutrients. Phyto is another word for kind of plant or growth. Nutrient is obvious. So phytonutrients are a large category of different types of molecules that our cells need and flourish around. And also not our cells, but our invited guests in our microbiome, in our gut, the bacteria, they also benefit. And they actually convert some of those phytonutrients into other useful metabolites. And that's a big fancy term for other smaller or processed particles and molecules that our cells need. So these phytonutrients might be resveratrol, quercetin, fisetin, most of the B vitamins, vitamin C, glutathione, berberine. I could go on and on. A lot of these things you hear about the healing benefits of dark chocolate, the cacao, the elements in green tea, the ECGC, things like this. These are all phytonutrients. Guess what? Plants package phytonutrients in exosomes. So it's quite ironic, and I'll tell you why, but it's quite ironic that when you go to your local vitamin shop and you say, "Sir, I would like a bottle of quercetin. I hear the quercetin is a great anti-aging longevity phytonutrient. I'm going to start taking some quercetin." To produce that quercetin, it's either synthetic, which is fine, or it's extracted from plants that are high in quercetin, where the plants are juiced, and then the chemical process opens up the exosomes that the plant's made to release the quercetin into a concentrated form. And that sounds great. You get this concentrated, high purity quercetin. Here's the problem. You eat it, you swallow the capsule, it digests in your stomach. Some of that gets into your body, into your bloodstream if it's not fully digested. Now it's bouncing around your bloodstream. Very little of it actually enters the cell where it's needed. Why? Because the cells have membranes. They have like a skin layer. They don't want to be bothered. And only certain things are allowed into the cell unless they're encapsulated in a membrane-like thing. And the cell goes, "Yeah, come on in. You're one of us." So some vitamin producers have come up with something called a liposome, where they actually make a capsulation that simulates an exosome. So a liposome is a synthetic exosome. Nature's already figured this out with the exosome. And the liposome can increase the delivery and absorption of a phytonutrient into your cell where you need it. Well, guess what? Nature's already figured this out. And I'm amazed that we work so hard to create these supplements and their delivery to our cells is so bad. So a plant exosome is delivered to your cell at somewhere between 700 and 4,500 times what a standard supplement would deliver. That's incredible, right? So why don't we take exosomal plant, nutrients? Well, it's been very difficult and laborious at the lab bench to do that until the last 5 to 10 years. So we found a lab in Italy that can do this for us. And we sourced organic longevity facing fruits and vegetables in the Mediterranean blue zone where people tend to live 100 or more readily than in other places. So we sourced various citrus fruits, papaya, mango, things like that. And we had the lab extract the exosomes. And now we make that in a capsule. And we named these Longevex for longevity exosomes because that's what we were facing at that time. And we have other products in the pipes, as you said, in the pipeline. This longevity, we studied it in a preclinical study, and it showed a few really cool things. First, it did raise the expression of sirtuin-1. And for those of you out there who are not physicians, sirtuin-1 is a longevity gene. If you've ever heard of resveratrol, it's the gene that gets stimulated in resveratrol. It's one of the genes when you look at these worms who live 3 times as long when they're given certain nutrients. It's the sirtuin-1 gene activity. It's a mitochondrial gene, actually. So we see SIRT1 go up, and we see reduced reactive oxygen species, ROS. And for those of you that aren't clinicians, that means less oxidative stress in your cell, less rusting and degenerating at the cellular level. And these are markers of longevity for that cell. And if your cells are living longer, then of course the individual is living healthier and longer. This is Longevex. These are plant-derived exosomes. It's a single small capsule a day. And we're excited. We launched it last May, 2025. And it's been very busy. So now I have another business that I'm running where we have this nutraceutical, and we have other things in the pipeline with those exosomes from plants that are highly anti-inflammatory, like curcuminoids and ashwagandha, things like that. We're working on other things with, working to have weight loss. Some of the green tea phytonutrients are incredible with what's called the glucose transporters and blocking them. So if you can't get sugar in your cell, then it's like you haven't had any sugar. So we have a couple things in the pipeline, and we're excited about that. So thank you for letting me, share that.
Well, thank you for sharing. And I'm really keen to get back to this area of the terrain, the first thing you address with your patients, because it's something that the listeners can straight away think about, their terrain. And obviously you're constantly getting these Google alerts and, in terms of studies and things like that. Where you're at with the most important things around setting up that good terrain to really, I guess, support healthy cells?
I would lean on maintaining muscle, exercise, and really good muscle, take your muscles to failure exercise. So we re-envision people's exercise programs. We focus on often less cardio and more heavy lifting, resistance training, weight bearing, especially when stimulating bone density. Bone density and muscle mass are your friends. Muscle is very rich in mitochondria, and the more attention you give your mitochondria, the better you are overall. It's almost as if our cells are here to take care of our mitochondria, So, your cells are healthier if your mitochondria are healthier. So exercise is a great way to do that. And doesn't have to be all day. You don't have to spend hours in the gym, doing that. There are really great strategies to get a lot out of a short workout. So we love high intensity intervals. We love, lifting heavy. We do 1 set to failure with weights instead of the traditional 3 sets of 10, that we all probably do sometimes and get through them without problem. We're really not getting the work done. We really need to get to that failure point. At that failure point, that last rep that you cannot finish, that's where the work is done. That's where the cells scream out by releasing these survival peptides. Some of those peptides called myokines or exerkines stimulate the brain and the heart. And this is why people who exercise have a lower risk of dementia and heart problems.
Thanks for sharing, because it's there's certainly a lot around the exercise and what's best, and so really good to get your insights as to where you're seeing the results in terms of I guess lifting heavy and high intensity training. The other one is the US just released their updated, or the FDA released their updated food pyramid, right? And there's been a lot of talk about that, and so I'm keen for you to get your insights on that in terms of that, it's promoting more protein. And this is a first for, in terms of a change in the food pyramid. I'd really love to get your take on it.
Yeah. Well, for years, I was telling people, don't listen to the government to tell you what to eat, right? Because it was upside down. Now we've got some improvement. We have someone at the helm of the Health and Human Services who really wants to make a difference that is for citizens, not for companies. So protein, we are protein animals, protein eating animals. We cavemen hunted and they got most of the nutrition from meat, and that's protein. And then, berries, fruits, and vegetables were just during periods of we need to go hunting again, So, so really we are meant to have protein, we are protein, nitrogen based organisms. Even if you've watched sci-fi TV shows and they say we're carbon based. No, we have a carbon exoskeleton. We are nitrogen based. And the proteins, the peptides all have nitrogen. All those molecules, amino acids have nitrogen. You can't do anything. You can't make an enzyme without nitrogen. Ribosomes have nitrogen. You can't make them. You can't have them. You can't do anything. So we are protein animals. So you have to eat protein. And most people do not eat enough protein to maintain their muscle mass. And certainly if you want to put on more muscle, and there are a lot of people who need it, you're going to need more protein. And it has to be good protein. So we like clean meat sources, fish, and then whey, dairy protein. And an average size adult needs 100 to 150 grams a day, really just to maintain. So it's hard to get that amount of protein.
Absolutely. Yeah. Like when I look at those figures and then look at the amount of food you have to consume to hit those numbers. So how do you work with your clients in this space? How are you getting, supporting your clients to do this?
We look at their diet. There are some applications on a smartphone you can use to track your macros being how much protein, fat, and carbohydrates. And so people can learn, oh, wow, I really am not getting enough protein, and increase their protein consumption. Luckily, we have access now to these 30-gram sugar-free or extremely low sugar whey drinks, protein drinks. And so I keep my own refrigerator stocked here in the office and at home. And instead of reaching for some beverage, I'll grab one of those to quench my thirst and, charge up my protein levels. So I can behave and maintain muscle as an older guy. I want my muscles, right? And two things make muscles: nitrogen and stressing the muscles, exercise. So you got to have those things. Yes, you need carbs and a few other things, but a
And
lot
you
of people,
mentioned,
you need the protein.
yeah, yeah. And you also mentioned earlier about hormesis, and one of the great ways of doing that was fasting. And so this brings up an interesting picture in terms of, I'm thinking, consuming all this protein and then somewhere fitting in a fast,
Right,
right? So,
right,
so
right.
what's this balance in terms of optimizing this picture of around getting enough protein and being able to do enough hormesis around fasting?
Well, by fasting, I mean, there are a few different methods. So method one is called intermittent feeding or intermittent fasting, where you really only eat in a 6-hour window, give or take, a day. And we were not meant to eat all day. And we're certainly not meant to eat outside of our light cycle of the circadian rhythm. We're not supposed to eat at night. Sun goes down, you're done. Your molecular mechanisms in your cells are switching into repair mode. That means go to sleep. Now, do we do that? No, it's the modern world where watching television or streaming services or working on our computers or whatever we're doing, most people stay up later, are not getting enough restorative sleep, and they're stressed and all this. So you really need to focus on the sleep. But that intermittent feeding is a great way to sort of get a little hormesis. But a true fast, whether it's a 24-hour fast or if you really can maybe twice a year do a 72-hour fast, as long as the other, 355 days a year, you're eating the right amount of protein, we're okay here. I'm not worried about, you're not going to fast every week necessarily. Some people do. They start the week off of the fast. As long as you're making up for it on the other days with protein, you'll be okay.
Fantastic. And you mentioned sleep, and we can't go past, this whole conversation talking about regenerative medicine and longevity and, bypassing sleep. So I'd love to get your latest insights on sleep and what's really important.
Well, let me use this as a plug for melatonin. So when we talk about hormone optimization, well, melatonin is a hormone that we make in our pineal gland in our brain. And we really make a lot of melatonin, and we sleep so deeply and restoratively when we're teenagers. And anyone out there who's ever tried to rouse a teenager in the morning knows they're practically in a coma, right? Get up, it's time for school. Get up, get up, get up. No. But when you're older, you start to develop potentially issues sleeping. You wake up in the middle of the night, or you don't sleep as long or as well, and you're not repairing. Your cells need to repair at night. You repair your DNA, you clear out oxidative byproducts, You have to get that restorative sleep. And that's not just sleeping, that is sleeping deeply. Because we don't make as much melatonin, I'm a big fan of restoring melatonin at bedtime. It's not just to help you get to sleep. It actually gets you deeper. You'll dream better, which is a sort of a symptom of sleeping deeper. And if you're not using some type of health tech to track your sleep, you would learn a lot, whether you wear a device on your wrist or a ring that tracks your sleep. I actually don't like to wear anything at night. So on my cell phone, on my nightstand, I have a sleep app that listens to me sleep. And it knows by my breathing rate and things, or it estimates at least when I'm in deep sleep, when I'm in not deep sleep. It knows when I'm up or if I'm coughing or what have you. And I can track my sleep scores. And that knowledge can allow you to make some adjustments and changes. So restorative sleep is key for cellular health and healthy longevity for sure.
And you mentioned melatonin. How can the listeners, is it actually taking a supplement, or is it actually, yeah.
Well, the easy way is to take a supplement. If you want to go more advanced, there is a peptide bioregulator. A bioregulator means a very short peptide. So there's one called epitalon. I think its other name might be, or a close cousin might be pinealon. And this is one you would take to help stimulate your pineal gland to release melatonin. Then you don't need the supplement so much. You're almost restoring the native activity of your brain function. That's why I'm a big fan of peptides. And we almost just scratched the surface on peptides, but they can help restore a lot of youthful functions that we tend to lose with age.
Wow. And yeah, I really appreciate your time coming on again. It's so great to have you back and have you on the show and sharing your latest insights. We'll certainly get you back in the near future to share more insights and more updates as the science constantly we learn more, obviously, and you're educating us more. So I really appreciate your time,
Yeah,
Dr. Jeff. How can the listeners best connect with you?
Yeah, and thank you, Anthony. Anytime, call me, phone a friend. I'll be happy to, as topics arise, talk about them. But our brand is Recelebrate, and we celebrate the renewal of your cells. That is spelled RECELLEBRATE. And if you search that word with your search browser, I think we've almost cornered the internet with that word. So recelebrate.com, at Recelebrate on all the social channels. Give us a like and follow. And we try to post educational and sometimes funny things for you to enjoy.
Fantastic. I'll make sure that those links that you've mentioned are in the show notes. And thank you once again. And thank you, listeners, for tuning in to another insightful episode of Health Up. Please share it with others that you believe that could benefit, particularly if they're going through that sort of joint issues and concerns and not wanting to avoid surgery. This would be a great episode for them to listen to, because there are other options. Don't necessarily need surgery. It is an option, but there are other options, and Dr. Jeff has shared plenty of those other options. So please share it far and wide with others. Please continue to follow us and share. Share the episode. The more we can get this out to others, the more we can support others holistically in terms of their health and well-being. Thank you once again, Dr. Jeff, and thank you, listeners.
My pleasure.
Podcast disclaimer. This podcast and any information, advice, opinions, or statements within it do not constitute medical, healthcare, or professional advice and are provided for general information purposes only. All care is taken in the preparation of the information in this podcast. Connected Wellness Proprietary Limited, operating under the brand me&my Health Up, does not make any representations or give any warranties about its accuracy, reliability, completeness, or suitability for any particular purpose. This podcast and any information, advice, opinions, or statements within it are not to be used as a substitute for professional, medical, psychological, psychiatric, or any other mental health care or healthcare in general. me&my Health Up recommends you seek the advice of a doctor or qualified health provider with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition. Inform your doctor of any changes that you may to your lifestyle and discuss these with your doctor. Do not disregard medical advice or delay visiting a medical professional because of something you hear in this podcast. This podcast has been carefully prepared on the basis of current information. Changes in circumstances after publication may affect the accuracy of this information. To the maximum extent permitted by the law, me&my Health Up disclaims any such representations or warranties to the completeness, accuracy, merchantability, or fitness for purpose of this podcast, and will not be liable for any expenses, losses, damages, incurred indirect or consequential damages or costs that may be incurred as a result of the information being inaccurate or incomplete in any way and for any reason. No part of this podcast can be reproduced, redistributed, published, copied, or duplicated in a form without prior permission of Me and My Health Up.